Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about the Midseason Madness tournament, which happened this past weekend. 6 teams were competing in Korea, well 5 teams in Korea, 1 team in China remotely. And at the end of the 3-day, very late hours weekend, we finally have our Midseason Madness champion, and that is, no real shock to anybody, the Atlanta Reign. So I'll throw the bracket up here. You can see it. Atlanta's path to victory. They beat Houston Outlaws 4-1 in the grand finals to lock up that win. It was a pretty good tournament, all things considered. Very difficult to watch just from the hours, but obviously the games were in Korea, so you have to try to adapt to the fact that you have a live Korean audience and a Western production. It definitely made the hours a little difficult. I fell asleep every single day watching the games. To be fair, one day I couldn't watch them because I had work the next morning. But Friday night, Saturday night, I tried my hardest to stay up. I just could not do it. I was not strong enough to make it through all the matches live. But I did try. But I digress. Atlanta Reign walk away from this tournament as the victors. Relatively speaking, the bracket went as people would have expected, with 1 or 2 exceptions. But very, very good performance from the Atlanta Reign. Unsurprising, this team was able to walk away with the victory. We've known for a while that they were the best team in the world. They are the team to beat right now. And if you want to be victorious this season, you have to get through the Atlanta Reign, right? At the very least, you are not going to be able to get anywhere successfully this season if you can't get past the Atlanta Reign. And potentially there's a chance that that's a thing with the Houston Outlaws, right? Like, they're struggling. They've lost now 3 straight to the Atlanta Reign, but the Atlanta Reign look very, very good. I don't want to say that's like a negative Houston Outlaws, but what we're seeing very clearly is the Atlanta Reign are the best team in the world, the best team in the league. And it's very much a full team effort on the part of this team. This team is very, very consistent, and they're very good top to bottom. You just think about the performances we got out of the support line with Chio and Fielder. We even saw some Vigilante in the tournament this time around, which was nice to see. Donghak, I think, is probably the leading Rookie of the Year candidate definitively now. I was very, very high on Sugar Free. I still am very high on Sugar Free. I think if Sugar Free and Vancouver kind of have a really good second half of the season, I definitely think there's a possibility he climbs the ranks once again. But I think right now you have to look at Donghak as the favorite and the clear-cut favorite to win that award. I think Hawk, when he comes in, plays a very big role. I think Hawk is one of those really interesting players, and you consider the fact that the vast majority of the players in this roster are Korean, and Hawk does not speak Korean, right? He comes in, and he definitely has to kind of find his place on this team and kind of learn how to work with his team. But when he does come in, I don't think this team looks bad. I don't think this team all of a sudden, loses some of their kind of fire and what makes them really, really good. So I think that is a really good part of this team. And then you just look at what you've gotten out of Stalker and Lip. They have been phenomenal all season. They're such great players, such great talents. And so, to me, this is one of those examples of just a team that top to bottom is just firing on all cylinders. They're really consistent. They're really strong. They know how to really kind of get things going their way. And they're a very, very, very impressive team to watch. I think one of the storylines that I found very interesting in this tournament, and it's something that kind of happened at the end of the tournament, but when I was watching on the last day, I remember thinking to myself, there's a really good chance, and then it was a guarantee when the finals was locked up, but there was a very good chance that this tournament would solidify a player as being the first player to win at least one tournament with 3 different franchises. We've seen players win tournaments with 2 teams before, but we've never seen anybody before now win a tournament in 3 different places. And I think if you had tried to predict who that would have been 2 years ago, a year ago, I don't think many people would have really guessed it. But with this win, Fielder becomes the first player to win a stage title, at the very least, with 3 different franchises. He won the Summer Showdown in 2020 with the Paris Eternal. He won several things with the Dallas Fuel over the last 2 seasons, and now Midseason Madness win with the Atlanta Reign. I think Fielder is a player who doesn't really get the recognition that someone as successful as him and as talented as him really gets. When we talk about the best flex supports in the world, we're talking about Shu, we're talking about Violet, we're talking about Twilight, we're talking, recently we've been talking about Skewed a lot, and we don't really talk about Fielder. We're just like, yeah, Chio and Fielder are a really good support duo, but it's always Chio and Fielder. It's never just Fielder. We never recognize just Fielder for what he's been able to do since he's joined the league, but he's phenomenal. He is really, really, really good. And he has consistently been one of the best flex supports in the league. He has consistently been a successful championship tournament winning flex support. And I think that there is a lot that goes into that. And I think it's one of the things that's really, really impressive when you consider what he's done in his career. Obviously, I don't want to single him out as like the only piece of this team that contributed, or that he's the only storyline. He's just the one I wanted to highlight because I think it's very interesting. I think it's really, really cool that we're getting to that point in the Overwatch League where we have those types of accomplishments and achievements that players have been able to reach, right? We've had those players, that have played for 4 different franchises. I think 4 is the most we've had. I don't think anyone is more than 4. But, we're getting those kinds of achievements of like players where they've played for a lot of franchises, but now we're getting to those players who have won with multiple franchises, which is really, really impressive. And so just thinking about the Atlanta Reign and what they've done so far this season, yeah, they get their first tournament victory, they get their first title under their belt, which is really impressive and really good for them as an organization. They have been grinding very, very hard. You think back to they've been a very solid team for the past several years. 2021 was a very good year for them, of course. They made the grand finals. 2022, they had a really good opening half to the year before kind of falling off in that second half of the season. And then this year, new roster, tons of talent, tons of stars, and they finally get it done and get that first title under their belt. And over a Houston Outlaws team that we view as the second best team in the league. And they really are a very good team. They are the only team this season that has really been able to push the Atlanta Reign in any capacity. The winners finals was such a close series. I think it was genuinely the best chance that Houston had, the best chance any team has had this season to beat the Atlanta Reign outside of the Pro-Am. I think that Houston, if they wanted to beat Atlanta, they had to win that game. I think that just winning that game was the key to being able to actually win in the grand finals. I think that when you have to win 4 maps against Atlanta, it's really, really tough. If you can't win 3, how do you expect to win 4 type of thing? And I think the exhaustion of having to play back-to-back matches, I think that does kind of impact you. We do see that there is a benefit to being the top seed going into a tournament, right? If you get through on the upper bracket, most of the time you win the tournament, right? So this is just another further example that kind of shows you how important that is. And I think Houston losing in that fashion, as close as it was, really did end up being the kicker that kind of hurt them. And I think that really kind of was one of the things that really ended up having the biggest impact, other than the fact, of course, that Atlanta are phenomenal and this meta is very, very good for them. And they're able to play to their strengths and their comforts. You can put everyone kind of on their best heroes. Houston, they're able to do what they can too. I think they have a very, very good roster that was able to play to their strengths as much as they wanted to, generally speaking, but it just was not enough to get over the hurdle that is a superstar roster in Atlanta. That just top to bottom has looked very, very good. And I thought it was very interesting. There was some clips in between the matches where they would have like media day and they would talk to the teams. And they had players, I don't remember who it was. It may have been Chio or Stalker. I don't remember exactly who it was, but they were kind of talking about how much Gator has helped with the team and how much he's been kind of an important part of kind of helping a bunch of these players who have never lived in the U.S. before kind of adjust. Lips never lived in the U.S. Stalker didn't live in the U.S. Donghawk didn't live in the U.S. So you do have a bunch of players who this is their first time in the U.S., their first time living in the U.S., and for everyone but Vigilante, right? Like none of them had lived in Atlanta before. So you kind of just see like what type of organization Atlanta has been. They've been phenomenal. They've been so good, and I think that they have worked so hard to get here. And we're seeing kind of the work that they've put in. Houston has done a lot of that as well, and I think that's one of the things that helps Houston a lot as an organization, and why I still think they are one of the only teams that I feel any kind of confidence in their ability to potentially best Atlanta as we go down the season, and I think they're going to play next stage. If you're trying to put teams against other teams with kind of similar schedules and strength of schedules and records, these teams most likely are going to play again, probably 2 or 3 more times this season if we consider playoffs as well. So I'm excited to see the next time these two teams play. Maybe Houston is able to pull one of those off. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. But right now, Atlanta looking good, looking like if they can keep up this momentum, they'll be rivaling the likes of that 2019 Shock roster, that 2021 Dragons roster of just total dominance, beginning to end, just kind of unreal levels of hype and height of performance. That's kind of where this team could be going if they keep this trajectory up. I think the biggest shock of the tournament for most people was the Florida Mayhem. They went in my opinion, as one of the weakest teams. I thought that they were going to have one of the weakest performances of any team in the tournament. I did not predict them to get past Hangzhou, and they did not get past Hangzhou. I did not predict them to get past the Seoul Infernal. They did, almost getting reverse swept by the Infernal, but the Mayhem were able to hold them off on the final map. And then Mayhem with a dominant 3-0 victory over the Boston Uprising before then dropping to the Houston Outlaws. So Florida's a team that has been impressing me quite a bit. I think that they have very, very, very much kind of solidified themselves in my mind as top 3, top 4 minimum in the Western region. Yes, they lost the Gladiators in the knockouts, but they bounced back and got the revenge against them to qualify to this tournament. They're a very good bounce back team, which I think is a really important thing to see from a team. They have had very good lower bracket runs. They've had very good kind of ability to build upon where they have kind of fallen short in the day prior or the days prior, right? This tournament is another great example. They lose to the Spark day 1. They lose to the Spark first match of the tournament and immediately are able to bounce back and get a big win over the Infernal, really big win over Boston, and generally speaking, play pretty well against Houston. So I definitely like what we've seen out of Florida. I had them number 1 in my preseason. My power rankings preseason. Because of what I saw to them in the Pro-Am. They looked like a team that kind of knew how to get it together. They had a lot of the kind of things that I like to see in a team. They looked very much like a team that had synergy, had coordination that some of the teams didn't really show me. And so that to me was a very, very good look from them. And they showed it a lot again in this tournament, just the ability to stay together as a team. So a huge shout out to Gunba, what he's done as a coach. If I'm going to shout out Gator, I want to shout out Gunba as well, because I think he's done a great job kind of coaching this team, getting them to kind of get into a place where they know how to play around each other's strengths and weaknesses, and really, really, really kind of have that ironclad mental of being able to have a rough game, and instead of letting that boom you, instead of letting that be something that you kind of let get to your head, it fuels them, it motivates them to be better. And I think the run they had was very, very impressive. I think that their peaks are not nearly as high as a team like Atlanta or Houston, and it showed by the fact that they could not get past Houston. But I felt very, very good about Boston going into this tournament, and they beat them very convincingly. And there's things with Boston that I think helped Mayhem. I think there's certain aspects of Boston's team and the way their roster's built that kind of helps Florida. Florida very much likes those rush-based compositions. Boston, I don't think, strives in them. Smurf's not a great Reinhardt player. It's not what he's known for. They don't have a traditional flex DPS player, so I think that kind of helps Florida quite a bit. I think there's a very good chance that if the Seoul Infernal win that series against the Mayhem, Boston does make that lower bracket finals. I think you always have those kind of mismatches, those games that you don't really want to have to go up against a team in a certain matchup. I think Florida matches up very well against Boston. I think that's part of why they won. But also I think Florida is very good at playing to what they're good at. They've done a very, very good job so far this season at really kind of getting their strengths to be the thing they rely on, where I think you see a lot of teams that kind of just try to chase what other teams are doing, and I think Florida does a very good job at kind of understanding their strengths, their weaknesses, really kind of playing to what their players know best, and it's one of the reasons why I think the Mayhem are one of the most impressive and interesting teams to watch. I thought they were one of the most boring teams to watch in 2022. I thought they were so sloppy and they did not play great. Chorong and Merritt, phenomenal players that I do think help quite a bit. And I think that helps in a lot of ways to elevate this team. But not just that, I also think that we've seen a step in the right direction from Checkmate, from someone, from RuPaul to become very, very, very elite level players that I think has really helped elevate this Mayhem team as well. So I was very impressed by Mayhem this tournament. I thought they had a very good run. Surprised me a lot. I think they're the biggest surprise of the tournament. And I want to say good for them because they did well in the Pro-Am, they did well in this. They have solidified themselves as a very good team. When the games matter most, they do not let the big stage get to them. They thrive off of it, which is really, really nice to see. Boston, definitely a little disappointing in the result they had when you consider the fact that, you know, a lot of people had this Boston team making it pretty far. I had them getting third in the tournament. They got fourth. It's not a huge deal. It's more so the fashion that they lost their games. 3-0 lost to Houston. 3-0 lost to Florida. They did beat the Hangzhou Spark. They did get that 3-1 win there. But I don't think that they played to the best we could see out of them. To me, when they were losing, they just looked lost. And I think that's my big concern with this Boston Uprising team is when they look good, they look really good. And when they look bad, they look really bad. When they are losing, when they're struggling to kind of find their footing, they kind of fall flat. Like I said, I think some of it is I think they don't have that traditional flex DPS, but I think it does kind of limit them in some capacity. We see them, you know, they pulled out that Arisa comp on Shambhala Monastery. That was a wild map to wake up from a daze. You know, I fell asleep, I woke up, that map was on leg days screaming about Arisa. It was a weird experience to say the least. But I think Boston is a team that I still feel very good about them. I still think that they are better than most of the teams in the league. I would take them over both of the APAC teams that we had, both the Spark and the Infernal. But I think right now the Uprising, they need one or two little things that they need to work on. Maybe add a traditional flex DPS player, but also just kind of, they need to, I think, really get that kind of consistency in their performance. Win or lose, they need to look good because most of their losses this season have not been very good losses, right? Their loss to Atlanta was decent. It was a 3-1. Boston took a map, but their loss to Titans was a 3-0. Both their losses in this were a 3-0. So when they lose in pretty spectacular fashion. And when they win, sometimes it's close. Sometimes it's in a spectacular fashion. And so they're a very interesting team that I'm going to keep my eyes on. But the meta going forward into the next tournament could be something that doesn't quite play into their strengths as much. So I'm curious to see what they're able to do as the meta potentially shifts away from them, seeing kind of where they go. Obviously, it's too early to tell exactly what the meta is going to be, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens there. And the final two teams, of course, were the two teams from the APAC region, the Seoul Infernal and the Hangzhou Spark. I thought we'd get more out of the Infernal, personally. I thought they would do a little bit better in this tournament, but they fell to the Outlaws, which, I mean, it's understandable, and then they lost to the Mayhem. It was very close. They were almost 3-0'd by the Mayhem, but they had a very good last kind of 3 maps, honestly. Even map 5, they looked pretty good for most of it. They just did not end up going their way. But they were, I think, another one of those teams that may be a bit disappointing. The Spark, to me, did about what I expected them to do. I thought they would beat Florida. I thought they would lose to Atlanta. I thought they'd lose to Boston. So I can't say I'm that disappointed. Plus, they didn't get to play in Korea, which I don't know how much that helps or hurts them, but certainly something to kind of make note of. But I think this tournament was very big on kind of showing you that even the best in the East are not a match for the Western region. The West got all top 4 spots here. They had to travel to Korea. Obviously, most of the players are Korean, so I don't think it affects them as much as it would if they had to go somewhere like Hawaii in the past. But, you know, the travel didn't matter. Generally speaking, one-sided affairs. Generally speaking, the Western region teams just looked a lot better than the East. So it is a concern. If you're the Eastern region, you gotta try to find some ways to get onto a similar level as the West. Because right now, the Western region is the better region, and it's not even particularly close. Say what you will about, oh, well, the West had 4 teams and the East had 2 teams. They still lost consistently and across the board to those Western region teams. And so, to me, it is very hard to look at what they've been able to do so far and feel a lot of confidence in any of the Eastern region teams. If these are the best two teams, maybe Guangzhou Charge is that good as well. Maybe the Seoul Dynasty with a couple changes to their roster, maybe they can reach some of that level. But it seems to me very clear that the Western region is the better region. We all knew it, or at least felt that it was the case. But this tournament kind of solidified that is, in fact, the way it works. And so we'll see where things go in the second half of the season. It'll be interesting to see what happens as we bring in the contenders teams to compete more permanently. But it's going to be cool to see. It's going to be fun to watch, and I'm excited to see what the second half of the season brings. But that really is kind of my thoughts, my reactions, my initial kind of takeaways from what happened in the Midseason Madness. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the tournament, the things you really liked, things you didn't maybe like as much. I definitely think the hours and the schedule was a little unfortunate, but obviously the tournament's in Korea. There's only so much you can do about that. This is the experience that fans outside of North America have had for years, and I'm not going to make a big deal out of one tournament where the hours are not the greatest in the world for someone like me. It happens, right? It'd be that way sometimes. You just kind of have to deal with it and move forward. But like I said, let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the tournament. Things you liked, things you didn't like. Were you surprised by anything, really? Did you expect Atlanta to win in the fashion they did? Or were you a little surprised by how dominant it was at the end? Let me know. Or do you think that you expected more out of them? Whatever it is in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this as we go into the second half of the season. A lot of World Cup stuff coming up in the next week or so, so expect some World Cup content. Also, power rankings are going to be coming up as well, so keep your eye out for that. If you want any of that stuff, like I said, subscribe so you know when it comes out. But that's all for today. Thank you all once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.